Tonight, a special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim, as pressure mounts on Joe Biden to quit the race for the White House. Despair for the Democrats as Joe Biden stumbles his way through the first presidential election debate with Donald Trump. Party insiders are now asking if he should even continue his bid to remain in the White House after what some say was a car crash performance. For Donald Trump, a self-assured delivery peppered with some falsehoods and half-truths in a bad-tempered exchange.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. You have the morals of an alley cat.
He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World War III than anybody can imagine.
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, where that TV debate took place. Team Biden are saying today he will absolutely not be dropping out of the presidential race. But there is concern amongst Democrats at how bad Biden looked last night and how bad he might get.
I'm here in Manhattan Beach, a city which voted strongly for President Biden in 2020. What did people here make of his debate performance last night?
In the next hour, I'll be speaking to Democratic and Republican strategists, plus Trump's former White House communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, who switched allegiances to Biden, and now he's not so sure. We'll dissect why it went so wrong for Joe Biden, and if it's time for him to quit the presidential race, how does that happen, and who replaces him? That's all coming up on this special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Hello and welcome to this special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Last night's presidential debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden was as consequential as any presidential debate in history. We said it would be high stakes, but we certainly didn't think it would be as dramatic and pivotal as it was. The 90-minute CNN face-off 4 months before the election was the first chance for millions of Americans and millions more around the world to see the candidates go head-to-head. And what a spectacle it was. It was an agonizing, at times excruciating watch. The gulf between their performances was clear to see. For a man who's waiting to be sentenced for a criminal conviction, Donald Trump was disciplined and nimble and less belligerent than when the pair first debated in 2020. He made some claims which weren't backed up by facts, even some falsehoods which passed unchallenged. Then there was Joe Biden, who seemed confused, bewildered. He stumbled and rambled. He did nothing to allay concerns about his age, prompting some Democrats to label his effort an unmitigated disaster. Is now, some are daring to ask, the time for him to step aside? We'll discuss that in more detail in the coming hour, but first, our US correspondent James Matthews reports from Atlanta.
The morning after the debate before, and the mist hung heavy over Atlanta. It didn't cloud a clear-eyed and cold assessment that chilled the Democratic Party. 90 minutes had been a long watch in politics.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
It was America's big night. The political spectacle with the high stakes.
Donald Trump.
With their history, there was no handshake. There was hostility.
My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
Without question, the worst president, the worst presidency in the history of our country.
The debate between two old foes had put the question of infirmity centre stage. From an 81-year-old president, there were contributions that kept it there.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if...
Then there was this on a question about immigration.
The total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
It was the look and sound of a headline already written as the debate continued. They talked Donald Trump's recent criminal conviction.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star.
There were questions on world affairs.
And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have nothing going with this gentleman, and he's going to drive us into World War III.
The TV debate was triggered by Team Biden, designed to showcase strength and offer reassurance about the abilities of a Democratic president. Rather, it has imbued the party with a sense of crisis. Democrats who previously wouldn't listen to questions around infirmity are now openly calling for change at the top of the ticket, concerned at how bad Biden was and how bad he might get. For Democrats, it was a night to defend and deflect, and it wasn't easy.
I'm not going to spend all night with you talking about the last 90 minutes when I've been watching the last 3.5 years of performance.
Joe Biden went for waffles after the TV debate, not before a quick stage appearance with his wife, the First Lady. Not as awkward as the debate itself, but perhaps not far off. As bad a night as it was for the president, the Biden campaign insists he will absolutely not be stepping down, stating that he's the only person to have beaten Donald Trump, and he'll do it again. He hasn't made his own job any easier. James Matthews, Sky News, in Atlanta, Georgia.
Let's bring in James, who, of course, is still in Atlanta for us. I mean, James, we talked about this being high stakes yesterday, didn't we? But no one could imagine the way it has turned out. And this morning, I mean, the headlines have been absolutely brutal.
Yeah, brutal. You're absolutely right, Yalda. Headlines written by some of his strongest allies. The Democratic Party is in crisis. There was a sense of that in the immediate aftermath. But as I said in my report, that's crystallized. The Democrats that I'm speaking to this morning say, look, we need a change. The fact for them, though, the hard fact, is that change isn't going to happen. We are hearing from Team Biden that he will absolutely not drop out of the race. They're making the point that he's the person to have beaten Donald Trump and that he will do so again. So they're being quite strident this morning, talking about the second proposed debate on the 10th of September. They say it's all systems go for that. But I suppose the difficulty for Biden is, you know, he has styled himself very much as the person to beat Trump. Last night, he styled himself as perhaps the only man that Trump can beat. You look around last night, there was a spin room where various acolytes are deployed to talk the talk on behalf of Biden and the party at large. People like Gavin Newsom, young, handsome, charismatic. I interviewed him before the debate, asked him about Biden's infirmity, and he was loyal, said, look, absolutely no problem, nothing to see here. He repeated that afterwards. But the likes of Newsom, you know, he's the kind of individual that many are saying need to be ushered in at the top of the ticket. The problem they have is it's just too late. Biden enjoys strong support. He is the nominee. It needs his inner circle to say to him, you need to step down. That's the only thing that would make him take a step back, according to people I speak to. A hostile challenge, technically that could happen, but it's very unlikely given the timescales. Also the fact that any hostile challenger would not get the votes come the Democratic Party convention. We can show you some figures related to a CNN poll in the wake of the debate. It doesn't make great reading at all for Joe Biden in terms of who won and lost. The breakdown is this: Biden 33%, Trump on 67%. So that tells you something about the conclusion reached by American voters. Team Biden are saying, they're pointing to the positives, saying, well, he did well in fundraising an hour after, in terms of grassroots fundraising. It was the biggest we'd had since April 2023 in the hour after the debate. But that's slim pickings. Overall, they're acknowledging it was a rough night. That's Team Biden. Look at the wider Democratic movement, and they're not happy at all. Many are angry indeed. People who are running for re-election in November and beyond, they're saying to me today, he's just made our job far more difficult. I'm going out wanting to speak to people about me, my record, my opponent. All that I'm getting sucked into in the wake of this debate is conversations about the top of the ticket and the infirmity at the top of the ticket.
Indeed. James, thank you so much. And of course, we will be coming back to you throughout the programme for more analysis there from Atlanta. Well, one thing was for certain. It was always going to get pretty ugly fairly quickly. It was clear from the outset Trump and Biden have no respect for each other's credentials. Have a look.
Well, I said my retribution is going to be success. We're going to make this country successful again, because right now it's a failing nation. My retribution is going to be success. But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let the statute of limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things. All of the death caused at the border, telling the Ukrainian people that we're going to want $1 billion or you change the prosecutor. Otherwise, you're not getting $1 billion. If I ever said that, that's quid pro quo. That we're not going to do anything. We're not going to give you $1 billion unless you change your prosecutor, having to do with the son. This man is a criminal. This man, you're lucky. You're lucky. I did nothing wrong. We'd have a system that was rigged and disgusting. I did nothing wrong.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, you have said, I'm coming right to you, sir. Well, you want to respond? Go ahead. I'll give you a minute to respond.
The idea that I did anything wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two, the idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like that before. No president in our history has spoken like that before. Number three, the crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
Just a segment of that 90-minute CNN debate last night. Well, Democratic strategist Hillary Rosen is with me here in the studio. Hillary, I mean, I don't really know what to say. It was difficult to watch. It was agonizing, excruciating at times. Tell me your reaction.
I'm laughing, but it wasn't really funny. I mean, there's a lot at stake at this election in the U.S. right now. There's a troubled world. There's an economy in the U.S. that needs support. And I think it's clear that Joe Biden let his supporters down. And going into this debate, he was already behind. And that's the thing people aren't really focusing on. He didn't lose the election last night. He was losing. Last night was his opportunity to catch up, to show the country that he actually is in charge, that he has a vision for the future, that he's capable of not just doing it, but articulating it. And he failed at that. And they know he failed at it. And now they're in a world of hurt trying to figure out their next steps.
Yeah, it feels like a mad scramble. And some people who are quite close to Biden writing pieces today saying he needs to step down. But does it feel like this is now the 11th hour? It's too late?
Well, if he stepped down, it wouldn't be too late. Let's just, from a technical matter, let's get that off the
4
table.
months out?
Under the Democratic rules, you could have an alternative candidate or candidates vying for delegates at the Democratic convention. So if the president chose not to run for re-election, there could be a process to re-elect somebody. So all these, whiners talking about, oh, no, it's too late, we're stuck here. We're not stuck. There are options.
But you know Joe Biden, Hillary.
Yeah.
He's a stubborn man. He's been around in this business for 55 years. Is he likely to be the man who says, OK, I've had enough, I need to go?
Yeah. Him not stepping down makes it extraordinarily difficult to replace him under the process. But the thing that the Biden campaign needs to think about, that the White House needs to think about, that the president needs to think about is he is actually losing this race. It is clear. And they need to come to the table and first acknowledge that. What they keep doing is telling people who are worried or who see the polls, go to the streets or go to communities around the country and hear the lack of enthusiasm for his candidacy. They're calling everybody bedwetters and whiners and just get to work and it'll all be fine. Well, it's actually not fine.
No.
So they need they need to come forward and say, you know what, actually we are the underdogs. Actually we are losing. And they need to think, okay, am I the best person to do this? And how do I change it up so that I can position ourselves for victory?
Let's just show our viewers, Hillary, some reaction from the US networks to last night's debate. Let's have a look at this. No, we don't seem to have that yet, but we will be bringing that to you in a moment. Just reaction from the US networks, who usually, you know, the likes of MSNBC, even CNN, are perceived and believed to be sympathetic towards Joe Biden. But in fact, what we saw and what we're hearing is not the case. I'm being told we do have that now. Let's just play that.
The universal reaction was somewhere approaching panic. The people who were texting with me were very concerned about President Biden seeming extremely feeble.
As we speak, there is a deep, a wide, and a very aggressive panic in the Democratic Party. It started minutes into the debate, and it continues right now.
Joe Biden is done. He is not going to be the Democratic nominee.
I mean, that's pretty cutthroat.
Yeah.
But is he done, do you think?
Look, he has a chance to work this through, but not doing what they're doing. This, you know, and I think
why aren't they changing time? Is it arrogance?
It is an enormous amount of arrogance, and it's also not just on them. I think it is on Democratic leaders across the country who haven't really been as ruthless with him as they should be. You know, I'm so impressed at how politics is done now that I live here. The Tories were ruthless with Boris Johnson. They're like, yes, you've been our leader, and yes, you've been popular, but you know what? You're going to lose it for all of us. Get out. And they threw him out. You know, that Democrats have not done that with Joe Biden, even though his unfavorables are so much worse than Johnson's ever were.
Well, Hillary, we'll just keep you there, and let's have a listen into Joe Biden, because this is the first time he's making a public appearance since struggling through that first televised debate last night. He's in North Carolina. Let's have a listen in.
Thank you, North Carolina. I get in trouble with my mom looking down. It's good knowing you have my back. Eric, thanks for that introduction. We had a wonderful time spending time with your sons, Kristen and Carter. We're going to grow up to be incredible young men. You would have been really impressed the way they talked about their dad, how informed they were about what was going on. I was truly impressed, and I ate 2 hamburgers. A special thanks to Roy and Kristen Cooper. Roy, you've been a great governor. Which makes it all the more important that North Carolina elected a great governor to replace you, Josh Stein. And when I'm reelected again with your help, I want you to know that I'm not promising not to take Roy away from North Carolina. Whether he'll come or not, I don't know. And thanks to all the state and local leaders here today, the great musicians and entertainers who performed earlier. Folks, let me tell you why I'm here in North Carolina. I'm here for one. Carolina for one reason, because I intend to win this state in November. Are you going to see that? I think we are. And Roy's right. We win here, we win the election. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to stand up for the women of America. We're going to restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. We're going to stand up for the right to vote. We're going to stand up for Medicare and Social Security. We're going to fight for child care, paid leave, and elder care. We're going to keep lowering the cost of prescription drugs, not just for seniors, but for every single American. We're going to keep protecting the Affordable Care Act, which is why more than 40 million Americans have health insurance today. They didn't before. We're going to protect our children and get the weapons of war off our streets. We're going to provide clean drinking water, affordable high-speed internet, quality education for every child in America. We're going to secure our border and protect legal immigration. And unlike the other guy, we're going to stand up to dictators like Putin, because America bows to no one, no one ever. Folks, and we're going to keep dealing with the climate crisis. Look, more than anything, we're going to preserve, protect, and defend our democracy. Because more than anything else, that is what is at stake in America this election. Your freedom, your democracy. America itself is at stake. Now, folks, I don't know what you did last night, but I spent 90 minutes on the stage debating a guy who has the morals of an alley cat. Did you see Trump last night? My guess, he said, I mean it sincerely, a new record for the most lies told in a single debate. He lied about the great economy he created. He lied about the pandemic he botched, killing millions of people. He closed businesses. He closed schools, losing their homes, people all over this country. America was flat on its back. So I told Trump that he was just one of two presidents in American history who left office with fewer jobs than he started. Herbert Hoover was the other one. That's why I call him Donald Herbert Hoover Trump. And then he lied about how great he was for veterans. But then I told him how he had called a veteran who had given their lives in the country in World War I and refused to go to the grave sites. He called them suckers and losers. He tried to deny it. But let me ask you, are you going to believe a 4-star Marine general, his own former Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who said he said that? Or a disgraced, defeated, and lying Donald Trump? My son was one of those people. Not in World War I, but in the Vietnam. Folks, look. How about the fact that 44 How about the fact that's okay. How about the fact that 40 out of his 44 top advisors, including the vice president, aren't supporting him this time around. The people who know him best, 40 of them said, I will not support the man I work for this time around. It tells you a lot about the person who knows him. Look, he lied about how great he was on crime. I had to remind him that he oversaw a record increase in murder rates in 2020. On my watch, violent crime has hit a 50-year low. There's more to do with a 50-year low. And then I pointed out but the only convicted criminal on the stage last night was Donald Trump. When I thought about his 34 felony convictions, his sexual assault on a woman in a public place, his being fined $400 million for business fraud, I thought to myself, Donald Trump isn't just a convicted felon. Donald Trump is a one-man crime wave. And he's got more trials. He's got more trials coming up. Well, it's time for that. Look, the thing that bothers me maybe most about him, he has no respect for women or the law. He doesn't. And then, his biggest lie, he lied about how he had nothing to do with the insurrection of January 6th. We all saw with our own eyes. We watched it on television. We saw thousands in his direction attack the Capitol. We saw police being attacked, the Capitol being ransacked, the mob hunting for Speaker Pelosi, gallows literally set up for Mike Pence. And then he told them as he sat in the dining room, the private dining room, one door off my Oval Office. He sat there for 3 hours watching the TV. He did not a single thing to stop it. Nothing. Nothing at all. And now he wants to pardon all those convicted and criminals. But folks, for all his lies, we learned some important truths about Donald Trump last night. We learned he's still proud of being the person who killed Roe v. Wade. We learned he's still proud about the pain and cruelties inflicted on America's women. We learned he still believes that politicians, not doctors and women, should make decisions about the woman's health. We learned that if he's elected again and the MAGA Republicans pass a national ban on abortion, he will sign it. Donald Trump says he thinks overturning Roe v. Wade was a beautiful thing. I think it was a nightmare. No, I really mean it, a nightmare. And I made it clear again last night that if you elect me and Kamala, you give us a Democratic Congress, we will make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again. He continued to lie. He said, I quadruple taxes. Where the hell has he been? Which is a simple lie. I didn't raise a tax on anyone in America who they made less than $400,000 a year. And I won't in my second term either. We learned that Trump, who had the largest deficit of any president in 4 years because of a $2 trillion tax cut to the super wealthy, we learned that Trump wants to give another giant tax cut for the very wealthy and the biggest corporations. This time, $5 trillion, not a joke, $5 trillion. To pay for it, he's going to cut Medicare and Social Security. He'll cut health care. He'll do it all with millions of working and middle-class Americans all pay for another tax cut for the very wealthy. Then, to add insult to injury, he wants to raise taxes on the average family $2,500 a year. What amounts to a new 10% sales tax on all products imported in America. That's his new plan. For food, coffee, candy bars, and so much more. It's going to raise the taxes on the average family $2,500 a year. And most dangerously, though, we learned that Donald Trump will not respect this year's election outcome. He's still not respecting the last time out. Well, think about it. Every court in Newnan ruled that it was a fair election. He's still denying it, still telling lies. 3 times Trump was asked last night by the moderators, would he respect the election results if he lost this time? 3 times he refused to answer. 3 times. Folks, Donald Trump refused to accept the results in 2020. We all saw what happened on January the 6th. It's a direct consequence of that. It was an international embarrassment. By the way, as I go to these international meetings, I know every major world leader, and I literally, because I've been around, as you might have noticed. But they asked me, did he really mean this? Was this real? It caused a constitutional crisis and international embarrassment. Now, Trump is making it clear that if he doesn't win this time, there will be, in his words, bloodshed. No president has ever said anything like that. No president. His words, not mine. We're going to let Donald Trump attack our democracy again? I don't think so. Folks, we've come a long way. We've come a long way from the mess that Donald Trump left us. We came out of the pandemic. We're a long way from where Donald Trump telling us to inject bleach in our skin, that COVID is not that dangerous. Today, we have the strongest economy in the world without exception. 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, unemployment under 4% for a record 2 years in a row. Historic Black and Hispanic unemployment down. Historic creation of small business in Black and all communities across the nation, particularly in rural areas. Historic economic growth. Inflation has dropped from 9% to 3% and is still going down. I know we have more to do to get prices down. We have to take on corporate greed. They're making twice the profit they were before the pandemic. We got to make housing more affordable, provide child care, make the tax code fair. 16 Nobel winners of the economic Nobel Prize have looked at my economic plan this week. They've issued a report and a Trump's plan. Here's what they concluded. They said that my plan would continue to grow the economy and bring down inflation. 16 Nobel laureates. And that Trump's plan would send the nation into recession and inflation soaring through the roof. So don't take my word for it. Folks, let me close with this. I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know.
You're listening there to Joe Biden speaking at a rally in North Carolina, appearing for the first time since that televised debate with Donald Trump last night. And he seems to be more coherent, certainly, than he was yesterday. I'm joined now by the Republican media strategist, Brett O'Donnell, who has worked in numerous presidential campaigns. Brett, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. We're still watching Joe Biden speak there, and we will be going back to it in a moment. But he has what he had at the State of the Union address, a teleprompter, and therefore his sentences are making sense. He's not rambling, he's not fumbling or stumbling, certainly not the performance we saw last night.
That's right. When you give him a teleprompter, he seems to do better. But last night, when you take away the crowd, take away the teleprompter, and he has to think on his feet, then he shows who he really is. And last night was an utter disaster. Remember, when the phone call comes at 3 a.m. with a world crisis, there's no teleprompter that tells you what to do. You have to make a decision as commander in chief, and you have to be ready. And I think the American people know that, and that's why they're so nervous about what they saw last night out of Joe Biden.
Well, I guess the options that America have, many are saying, you know, between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, it's sort of a lose-lose situation for Americans. We've got one former president who, is filled with misinformation and, frankly, lying at times. And then you've got Joe Biden, who, frankly, can't string a sentence together. If you were to put a sort of impartial hat on, what would you have said to the team around Joe Biden in terms of how they should have prepared him for that?
Well, I mean, the most important thing for Joe Biden, the biggest question going into the debate was, could Joe Biden perform for 90 minutes? And so his team needed to focus on the performative aspects of the debate, not just filling his head with a bunch of facts and a bunch of lines. They needed to make sure that he went in, particularly for that first half hour, when we know that's when debates are won and lost. He needed to go in and have a strong performance, have a strong message, and go on offense. The problem was he got lost in that first half hour. He looked rambling. He was incoherent. He had no message, and he wasn't on offense. And all of those things, coupled with the fact that he just looked old and sounded old, created a disaster. And he could never recover during the rest of the debate.
I mean, I guess there were a number of conditions as well around this debate. You know, no audience, mics muted when the other person was speaking, as well as things like, you know, he couldn't consult his team in ad breaks. But I think one of the things that a lot of people are commenting on is that split screen where we saw Joe Biden with his mouth slightly open, looking almost dazed and bewildered, at times confused.
Yes, the physical presence, the visual presence, all had a huge impact. And by the way, that makes a difference in every presidential debate. If you go back to 2004, I worked with George W. Bush and warned about President Bush's nonverbal behaviors, and that's what cost him in the very first debate. He cleaned those up and came back and had strong performances in the second and third debate. But the day after that debate, I'll never forget, we wrote a line for him so he could go out and actually explain why he looked so bad in the debate. We heard nothing in this explanation or nothing in his recount of what happened last night at this rally that gives any indication that he had a bad night. They should acknowledge he had a bad night, talk about why, and move on. But the problem is they've got him on a teleprompter. And I think to acknowledge he had a bad night might acknowledge what most Democrats fear most, and that is he needs to get off the ticket.
Yeah, and at this point, some are even doubling down and saying, you know, he's ready to do the next debate, which is September 10. Brett, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Good to be with you.
Well, let's go back to North Carolina now and listening to Joe Biden, who is speaking at a rally there.
Nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing when we act together. You got it. So may God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Let's go get them, North Carolina.
You were listening there to Joe Biden speaking at a rally in North Carolina, his first appearance since that debate last night with Donald Trump. Let's bring in Hillary Rosen, who's here with me now, and she is a Democratic strategist. Hillary, you know, you and I were commenting as we were listening there to Joe Biden. You said, where was this Joe Biden last night?
Yeah, I think people would look at that all afternoon and say the same thing. He showed vigor, he showed intensity, and most importantly, he actually talked about what's at stake in the future. He said, we've got to overturn Roe v. Wade. He said, we've got to make housing more affordable. He said, we've got to make the tax code more fair. When you look at the issues that are happening across America right now, the issues poll overwhelmingly for the issues that President Biden is for and not for the issues that Donald Trump is supporting. And that's the unique thing about this race, is it becomes so much about competency for Biden and criminality for Trump, and not about anything that really people care about, which is why you have such a wholesale rejection of what's happening politically right now.
Yeah, you know, we often see these videos of Joe Biden go viral, of him shuffling on stage and kind of losing his train of thought when he's walking or talking. Last night, what Americans were exposed to, millions of Americans and also people around the world, was frankly, this was a president who's absent. It wasn't just his shuffling. His mind was absent at times.
He definitely lost his train of thought. And Americans deserve a performance like this one. They deserve a president who is going to have that kind of vigor and confidence, because it's not just at home, it's around the world. We started out today talking about this is kind of a troubled world right now, and U.S. leadership is as important as it's ever been. And that's what the Biden campaign needs to do. They need to come out and say, we understand these concerns. we've got this, and this is what we're going to do to change our strategy.
Well, Hillary, we'll keep you here as we'll be coming back to you a little later in the programme. But let's go straight to our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, who joins me now from Manhattan Beach in California. And Martha, I mean, where you are really sums up the base of Joe Biden. The people who support him have supported him overwhelmingly. And you know, when they've woken up this morning, I guess they've come to terms with what they saw last night and the kind of brutal headlines that we've seen across not just America, but around the world.
Yeah, millions of people, Yalda, watched that debate live, but many millions more will have woken up to seeing the excerpts of that interview, which are altogether more damaging for President Biden. Those long pauses, that rambling, that hoarse, rasping voice, and those moments where he deviated from the Democrats' strongest talking points, things like abortion, onto immigration instead. So in many ways, it's the internet world which will make this more damaging for President Biden. I'm in Manhattan Beach, as you mentioned, a heavily Democrat-leaning city, just sort of talking to people here about how they viewed President Biden and former President Trump's performances and whether it will affect the way they vote in November. I'm just going to bring in Loretta here. Loretta, you're a lifelong Democrat. What did you make of the debate last night, President Biden's performance?
To be frank, it was somewhat heartbreaking. I probably would have voted for Biden to not vote for Trump, but his communication difficulties were pretty obvious, sadly, I had to admit. And so now I'm not sure what to think or what to do.
You think then that last night's performance may materially affect the way you vote in November?
Vote or not vote or yes. Oh, yeah.
And interestingly, Brad, your husband, you're a lifelong Republican. What did you make of what you saw from President Biden last night?
I thought that what I saw, what Dana Bash and Jake Tapper brought to me as a listener and a viewer, as a Republican too, I thought they presented that debate appropriately and allowed me to see what the nominations can do, what these folks can do. And what brought to me was, unfortunately, we're talking about someone who didn't present himself very well as opposed to going over the issues of what we need to talk about here in America. It was more about performance than about issues and concepts.
Loretta, just quickly, you said before off camera that you might hold your nose and vote for Donald Trump instead.
Well, I'm torn. We have family in Israel, so I'd like to know that they'll be kept safe. On the other hand, women's health rights are probably my number one lifelong issue, so that's worrisome, but I don't know if we're going to be able to turn back Roe v. Wade, even with another Biden, term. Yeah, so I'm torn.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Loretta. Views there. I'll just very quickly bring in Stella, who's a first-time voter in November. Yes. What did you make of President Biden's performance?
I think Biden is cognitively declining. I don't think he's fit to be president, and I honestly don't think he ever was. I think he's like a pawn in the Democrats' game. So, yeah, I think Trump is the obvious answer.
There we go, then. A spectrum of views here in Manhattan Beach.
Martha, thank you so much. Well, while we were speaking a little earlier, Joe Biden made an admission on stage relating to his performance yesterday. Let's just have a listen in.
I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
That was Joe Biden a few moments ago. Well, I'm joined now by a man who's worked for Donald Trump inside the White House, former communications director Anthony Scaramucci. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. You know, over the years, you and I have spoken a number of times, and you've talked about why you believe that Donald Trump is unlikely to win this year's race and election, and you put your money behind Joe Biden. How do you feel tonight?
Well, listen, that was a terrible debate performance. And so if the election was held today, let's say we all went to the polls today, Donald Trump would win the presidency. The president looked out of sorts. And I think one of your last guests probably even explained it better than I can. He wasn't prepped right for that debate. You're an older man. You got to think like Roger Ailes did with Ronald Reagan. You don't fill his head with facts and figures that he's never going to remember. And so he came out of the block saying that he created 15,000 jobs when he wanted to say that he created 15 million, and it spiraled out of control from there. And then second, and the last point is on the split screen, nobody prepped him for, hey, there's going to be 2 minutes of you staring into the camera. You got to look like you're put together. You can't have your mouth open. You can't have a distant look in your face when you're listening to President Trump. And so those things killed him. I mean, even, he talked for 2 minutes. Sometimes he couldn't talk for 2 minutes, but it was really the 2 minutes when he wasn't talking that hurt him. And then, of course, the Trump kill shot was, I don't think he knows what he just said. I don't know what he just said, and I don't think he does either. And I think that was the kill shot last night. So that debate is over. I predict that Joe Biden is not dropping out of the race. We have 5 months to go here, and I see him regaining traction, but they've got to control him and prep him more for this. And just for your listeners quickly in the UK, Ohio has forced the Democrats to make a decision on their nominee by August 7th. So theoretically, if they wanted to pull Joe Biden, they only have 40 days to put this together to get somebody on the Ohio ballot. Now, I don't even think that's likely. So Joe Biden is going to be their nominee. And it's worse today than it was yesterday for sure, but there's plenty of time left in this race.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're also hearing that he's likely to do another debate on September the 10th. That's what we were hearing earlier today. But just looking at his performance just now at that rally, this is not a man who looks like he's going to step down or step aside or allow someone else to step in. So what do you think the Democrats should do in terms of a strategy? I mean, sure, 4 months is a long time in politics, but also a lot of Americans would have probably made up their minds after seeing last night's performance.
Yeah, but again, Americans, like many of us now, have very short-term attention spans, and there's a lot of things that can change. Remember, President Trump is going to be sentenced in New York on July 11th, which is 2 weeks from now. A lot can change. And you're right, election held today, Joe Biden loses, but 4 months from now, there'll be a whole new slate of facts. There'll be a whole new level of engagement and controversy that's going on. I don't think he has any choice but to debate, by the way. So if he's staying in the race, he's got to show up on September the 10th. And but they got to handle him better. They got to get him in more of a narrative setting, less in a fact-based setting. What he was doing there today in that rally was quite good. I know how to do the job. I may not be as quick on my feet.
He was reading off a prompter.
I understand that, but they can get him to speak in a narrative related to those bullet points, as opposed to trying to tell people how many jobs were created or what inflation went down to and all of the things that were, they prepped him and said, let's go to Camp David for a week. We're going to cram your head with all these facts. You're going to look super competent at the end of the debate. It was just the wrong strategy because he couldn't keep that together for the 90 minutes. But if they had went to him and said, okay, here's what we're going to prep you on: competence, the NATO relationship, our global alliances, a very strong economy, stick to those 5 themes, no matter what anybody says to you, he would have came out of there okay last night. It was just really bad. And also the split screen. I mean, you and I right now are on a split screen. And you look like you're listening to me. You may not be listening to me, but you're doing a good job looking like you're listening to me.
I'm listening.
And okay, well, I appreciate you listening. But my point is, the president looked out of it in the split screen. And I don't know who prepped him, but you can't look out of it in a split screen.
Yeah, indeed. As you say, all of those optics matter in something like this that's televised, not just across America, but around the world. Anthony, thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on the programme.
Nice to be with you. Have a good weekend.
Let's bring in Brett Bruen, former White House Director of Global Engagement under Barack Obama. Thank you very much, Brett, for joining us here on the programme. I mean, everyone's describing this as a fumbling performance, a party that's now panicked. The headlines speak for themselves. Well, what we just saw in the last few minutes in North Carolina does not look like a man who's going to step aside or walk away.
It doesn't, and yet I think we are going to watch this painfully play out over the next several hours, days. But ultimately, I do not think, and I'm not saying this because I wish it to be so, but I do not think that President Joe Biden can be the Democratic Party's standard bearer in 2024. Last night's performance was astonishingly bad, and you cannot just be strong on the teleprompter. You cannot just be strong in the midday rallies. You have to be strong in those debates. You have to be strong at all hours. And I thank President Biden for his service. I worked alongside him in the Obama White House, but he has got to give way to the next generation because there is quite simply too much at stake in this election. And stubbornly sticking on for the sake of his ego, for the sake of some sense of self-importance is quite frankly political suicide, but it is also going to put our country in peril. He needs to step.
And yet it feels like there is a Biden bubble, that those around him aren't necessarily tapping him on the shoulder, including Democratic elders, and having that kind of Nixon moment where it's like, Mr. President, it's over.
Well, and Lyndon Baines Johnson, another president who did, in fact, in 1968, step down in the face of Robert F. Kennedy Sr.'s campaign and the rising protest in the streets against the Vietnam War. You're right, an intervention is needed. And the problem, both with the Biden campaign as well as with the Biden White House, is that they are too insulated. They do not challenge assumptions. It's the reason why we saw such a poor performance on display last night. His campaign team should be fired. The campaign advisors should be fired. You put out your candidate in that kind of format. You ought to have tested him before you even proposed the idea, ensured that he could last 90 minutes. Anthony Scaramucci was talking about the need to stay focused even when you're not on camera, to finish 2-minute answers and to endure those questions over 90 minutes. He clearly could not, and I don't understand why in the world this was ever proposed by Biden himself.
Yeah, do you think that they over-prepared him?
There's a component of that. Yes, absolutely. And look, I've been in presidential prep. You're getting so much information thrown at you from all of these advisors, and then somehow you're supposed to retain it. President Obama was better, quite frankly, than President Biden is on this. And that's not just an age thing. Biden was never particularly good at retaining a lot of this information. But I think to the point of some of your earlier commentators, Biden needed to come in with a simple, sticky message. I'm a communicator. We prep CEOs and others all the time. Don't try and explain in that 2 minutes. You don't have the time to get across a bunch of facts and figures. It's about the feeling. And the feeling that American viewers walked away with was, quite frankly, one of great concern and confusion.
Yeah, indeed. Brett, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
We'll be with you.
Well, we've still got Hillary Rosen here with me in the studio. I mean, Hillary, it has been a difficult 24 hours for the Biden camp. But if I just take you back to that idea of the Biden bubble, which, you have been exposed to, a lot of the people very intimately around him, what do you think they're saying to him right now? Because they're seeing the coverage. They may even be protecting him from it, but they can see it.
They're seeing the coverage, and they knew that this could happen. They did. I mean, because they live with him every day. They understand when he's good, what environments he's good in and what environments he's not good in. Here's the interesting thing about the way the Biden operation works, which is this is really a person who has his own ego, his own sense of self. He is not one who takes advice in the traditional sense very easily from people who work for him. He thinks he knows it all. He's been around a long time. Some of that "I've been around a long time" is what exactly works against him. And so now to have a little humility, to step back, to think about what's best for the country, what's best for the party, is going to require him doing that. Yes, people around him need to push him to do that, but he is a very stubborn person, and if he doesn't get there, it's not going to happen. Something Brett said that I've been thinking about a lot, which is when Joe Biden was first running for president in 2019, he talked about himself as a bridge to the next generation. He talked about that in his inauguration. He's consistently said that that's what he cares about. He needs to take a really deep look at where he is building this bridge and how quickly he's willing to walk across it and let other people walk across it. And that, I think, is the thing that his team and other Democratic leaders have to be talking to him about over the next 10 days.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got about 30 seconds left, but this is a man who's been doing this for 55 years. Expecting him to change in the next 4 months is unlikely.
People don't change. His advisors tell me that a lot.
Indeed, very much so. Well, Hillary, it's been fascinating talking to you and covering this momentous occasion and everything that we've seen over the last 24 hours. Thank you so much for joining us. So, lots to dissect there. Joe Biden admitted he doesn't debate as well as he used to, but he knows how to lead the country. That's his message. Despite all the pressure and controversy surrounding his performance during the debate, we've heard from a current president and a candidate insisting he's the right man for the job now and for the next 4 years. We'll have to see how it unfolds in the next few months. Thank you so much for watching our special edition of The World.